Eileen feels like it's based on a book. Because it is. A pretty bad book if this movie is anything to go off. I have only ever read one book, and it's the only one I can relate to. The thing about books are that often they just don't translate very well to films. Do I really know if the original book translated well? No, I do not. But from doing months of extensive and particular research on Wikipedia, I can confirm it's pretty much the same beat for beat. But that still doesn't mean that the depth or nuance of a book can be captured on film. Show, don't tell. Where a book is just tell, just don't stop telling. But I really don't think this book likely had much to say anyway. I didn't hate this movie, but I didn't really like it too much either. And for those who have watched the trailer and were concerned about how old the lead character is in the movie,
why don't you have a seat right over there, please?
She's 24. It's not a grooming movie, thank God. Lead actress Thomasin McKenzie just looks scarily young. And so does the female Dorian Gray, Anne Hathaway. These Hollywood satanic rituals must really be good for the skin. She is truly a woman to Napoleon for. I mean simp. And Shea Wiggum, who plays the drunk father to Eileen, well, let me tell you, he looks like total shit. The movie is set in 1960s Massachusetts and revolves around, no surprises, Eileen, who is a low-confidence, sexually repressed, and well, generally repressed young woman who, by day, works at a young offenders prison and by night looks after her drunk and depressed ex-cop father. We know she's sexually repressed, as within the first 30 seconds of the movie, we see her getting turned on, watching a couple in another car getting jiggy. She then proceeds to put a pile of snow down her pants, as you do. And then, in the next 5 minutes, she fantasizes about being plowed at work by the prison guard, whilst touching herself. Yeah, it's one of those movies. Degenerate sexuality is basically now the new thing. How many movies have I reviewed this year with some kind of masturbation in it?
Stop it. Get some help.
Eileen is looked down upon, dismissed as dull and plain, and generally lives an awful life. It could be worse though. She could live in Detroit. Detroit! No! Eileen continually saves her money for some kind of escape that never comes until the prison gets a new psychologist, Rebecca, played by Anne Hathaway. Rebecca is everything Eileen wants to be. Beautiful, smart, confident, blonde. Rebecca takes an unusual liking to Eileen, and Eileen by return quickly develops very strong feelings for Rebecca. This I can totally relate to, as I also felt strong feelings in my pants for Anne. What follows is a rather subtle romance, which arguably could be seen as Rebecca taking advantage of Eileen, but at the same time, Eileen seems to want that to happen, and the question is, who is actually the more toxic personality here? We also have Eileen's relationship with a perpetually drunk father, and the interactions between them are the highlight of the movie. The father's continually cruel comments about Eileen being someone who will amount to nothing, never be loved, a passenger in life, are cutting and coarse, and really help us relate to Eileen, who just seems like a nice girl, devoid of confidence and options in life. There is a particularly great dialogue sequence about an important eventual plot point in Liam Polk, and how he murdered his father in his sleep, and how also Eileen's father could never imagine Eileen with a knife, to which she then asks if he could imagine her with a gun. The inference is that she could shoot him, if not stab him to death. But the father, without hesitation, says she couldn't do it either because of how pathetic and nice she is. He instead posits that when he's dead and she's old and alone, she will likely take the easy way out and end it all with the gun herself. The father pigeonholes her personality repeatedly and reinforces that she is a nobody, a failure, and someone who will die alone. It's brutal, but brilliantly written and performed. Both actors give great performances, especially the lead. She's so good, you genuinely believe she is someone who has been repressed and tormented for years into being the shy, low-confidence wallflower. I can't give her any fault here. She really does a superb job leading this film. Anne Hathaway is also good, and she plays her role well, even if the character seems all over the place and her intentions never make any sense. That's a writing issue though, so Anne, you still get a B+. The idea that psychologists are usually the ones with the most problems also seems to be the theme here. The movie has a more 70s film vibe, despite it being set in the 1960s. In fact, it reminds me a bit of old Stephen King movies in the way it's shot, the colors used, the title and credit fonts. It's all reminiscent of a classic era of films. The actual film used also seems to be a bit grainy too. It's a nice stylistic choice. Music is taken from 60s crooners and interspersed with percussion like jazz a la Whiplash for the more intense moments. The dialogue seemed badly mixed at times though, whereby despite being in a cinema, I couldn't hear some of the lines clearly. Whether this was my cinema's fault or the film itself is unclear. I will, however, be fair and blame the film. The film isn't that long at 98 minutes, but it still does drag to some extent as we're constantly waiting for some kind of payoff. Thankfully though, the director intersperses some jump scares to stop us falling asleep, courtesy of Eileen's father's firearm. 10 out of 10 to the sound design team for giving me a repeated cardiac arrest. So, what's the real problem with this movie? It's not really the cinematic execution or the performances, it's the actual story itself. So, the problem is the source material. The problem is the reason this was made. Ergo, this film should not exist. Probably. The plot, although proceeding as a bit of an unusual romance where we're trying to figure out Rebecca's motives, takes a turn at the end which makes no sense, seems highly improbable, and ruins all the good work up to that point. It's like a different movie with different characters. This can work if it's been properly set up, but Rebecca really doesn't hint at what's to come in any meaningful or even subtle way. I guess the author had to do something to make this more memorable. That Liam Polk character I mentioned had to come to fruition somehow, but the author isn't the Coen brothers. It all ends a bit abruptly and leaves you with a feeling of, what was the point of that?
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
For something which may aim to tell a story of a young repressed woman breaking out of her prison cell and becoming who she wants to be, we don't see any of that. We just see someone obsessive and is most likely mentally ill being manipulated by someone who also is most likely mentally ill. Sounds like modern dating. We never see a real character arc. Is that the point? What is the point?
Why are we still here? Just to suffer?
The movie does get points though for subtlety in the almost lesbian romance. This isn't in your face, and it almost has a bit of a student-teacher vibe here, but thankfully not the Chris Hansen kind. But then, as I've said, it takes a bizarre turn to just talk about a really boring plot point which seems abundantly obvious as to its truth, but what Eileen and Rebecca do is complete nonsense and voids the rest of the film's build-up, which equates to 80% of the movie up in flames. Eileen is like a classic jam donut. It looks great, it's all well made, but when you bite into it, you can't find the jam. You keep biting over and over and over again, and when you do find the thing you're looking for, there's so little of it, you can't not be disappointed. This is one to just watch on TV or streaming when it releases. It's not a bad movie on the whole, it's just not particularly good either. Eileen gets a disappointing donut out of 10.